Great. Happy Monday. I was about to say Friday. I guess for some reason, Finance Friday is still in my head. But glad to be back at it for the week. We've got a lot to get done, and we have a big presentation today from Sue Lessard, our finance consultant, who's come in to help us on our reconciliation part of the finance project, so I want to leave a lot of time there. I had a few, just one real major update is we had a snowplow roll a few storms ago. The driver's okay. There were some issues that we had to look into with that person, but they're doing okay. They're going to be coming back to work, so that's good to hear. We are going to do kind of a safety review of the incident, both with our police and fire departments and safety teams. It was, I think we've had some ice storms. It was, a very icy, I believe, kind of dirt road out there, and that's when our plow drivers are up there. They're there to make it safe. So obviously they operate under very dangerous conditions. But I know Sarah's going to be reaching out to some people at Maine DOT to kind of review their standards for snow plows and operations and safety and kind of after action reporting, how we can dial that piece in. But glad that the driver's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I was hoping that we could. It wasn't like a multi-flip. It kind of it was a roll on its side. But it looks like it's not going to be repairable. So we will get some insurance money back for it, but we have to look into a new plow. I'm hopeful that the insurance funds from this year could maybe cover the 1-year lease or 1-year first-year payment on the lease, but we'll have this on the agenda for the council meeting next Tuesday. So more updates there, but we also have a highway equipment reserve account that we might need to pull from as well. So we're looking into all those options, but we need our reserve snowplow. Actually, I took some pictures of it the last time, even before this happened. I was out there because the thing is almost fully rusted through. I mean, it's not.
It was the same truck?
It was a different one. It wasn't our new one. I should let.
Yeah,
folks-
They've got another one that needs to be put out to auction.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not safe to be on the road.
Yeah, the backup that were there, and that was even before this incident. I was just looking at it, and you can just see holes on all sides. The bed's
Yeah,
rusted out.
It's gone past its usefulness.
Oh,
Making nice
Is it-
parts.
Oh, that's
Is
right.
it-
You were out there for that.
Yeah.
Is it safe to use even as a backup?
I'll follow up on there. I would assume so, just because that's we recently had an incident of not recently, probably over a year ago now, of me being notified that there was trucks that were uninspectable, and
Right.
that we immediately brought that to the finance or to the city council to replace those trucks because we can't have the teams drive cars that aren't inspectable. If they're not inspectable, they're not safe. So
The other, I guess, question is the delay time. If we're going to order a new truck now, do they?
there's one, I believe,
What's the
that's
turnaround time?
kind of held on a lot right now that's available. And there's a lease structure for it. I know Nate's looked into, I think, First National Bank. So we'll have that option together for you all. But so there will be something. I think there is an option where we don't have to wait a year.
Okay.
Fortunately, we did move on that new truck too, because if we didn't do that last year, we would have been in even worse shape for this scenario. So I'm hopeful that we'll be able to get to full capacity soon. And there's been a lot of snow events, as you can imagine. I know the teams are.
They must be exhausted.
Yeah, and our poor highway superintendent. Gosh, we were in a meeting. I got to start just saying you don't have to go to these meetings because when he does so much work and is out there plowing so much. I got to kind of keep in mind that decrease on the administrative responsibilities, but I can imagine a lot of the rest of the team too. It's been a lot of snow incidents over the last month and a half. So
Yeah. I'm glad the driver's okay, as you say.
absolutely. With that, that's it for me, and I'm happy to send it over to Sue. Okay.
The infamous Sue Lessard.
The infamous Sue Lessard.
I don't know if infamous is. Yeah, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I've never spoken in public before. That may not be true.
Yeah.
Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to be here this morning to just briefly discuss sort of where I am in this process. As you all know, I was initially engaged with the city to just sort of take a look at your overall financial department structure here in the city, which was spread all over the place and not a very centered operation. And I went through that process, interviewed all of your department heads, got feedback on sort of what their needs were from finance, interviewed finance to see what, we did a lot of work on that. Went into the second phase, which I called in the weeds, which is sort of being in your accounting system to see how it's structured and that kind of thing. And you have a very interesting accounting system in that it is comprised of multiple software systems that feed into the major Cassell system that's used for most of your work. But the feeding from the Trio system into Cassell, while there's an upload that they have that moves it from when money is collected into Cassell, it's an Excel spreadsheet. It's not finding things that may not be correct in that transition. And when I say that, it's because in the system where you're collecting your taxes and doing dog and hunt and fish and all those kind of things, all it is a receipting system. So it doesn't, and taxes are complicated. There are abatements, there are corrections, there are all sorts of things that happen with taxes that without a corresponding budgetary system to connect to, come across in ways that make it very difficult to get to what became my primary purpose right now, which is reconciliations. Your general ledger account for 25 taxes should match the list of taxes that we say people owe. John, Jack, Fred, Bob, this list total matches this number. And it doesn't. Well, it didn't. It does now, but it didn't for any year of taxes, liens, or personal property. And one of the primary reasons for that is when corrections or abatements are done in this Trio system and uploaded into the Cassell system, they just wipe each other out. They go in as a debit and they go in as a credit, and there's no impact to the outstanding account number. And I know that this is in the weeds, but this is the difficulty in trying to reconcile, is that you're practically looking at every cash up to see if that's where that issue occurred. And the only way that because this is an ongoing situation, at the end of '24, when the auditors did these reconciliations, the auditors reconciled all the taxes, liens, personal property, and everything at the end of '23 and '24. But, and made huge adjustments, $259,000 worth of adjustments at the end of '24 over all the years of taxes. But it continues because there's nothing to slow that, there's nothing to change that dynamic unless staff literally on every cash up, when they see it go into Cassell, into a tax year, if you see a debit and a credit, it's the same thing. There needs to be another journal adjustment done to correct that so that the list, the number you owe matches the list, which is, I'm OCD about this, only because the list of taxes are your largest income group. And it is imperative that the list of names and the total matches what your general ledger says you have to collect. That is that's like the Bible, you know, might be a shock, not everybody loves government, but if they think that you don't know what you're owed from things, that makes people like you less. And so these poor city employees have had to listen to me. This is where it needs to get, and so part of it is those abatements and corrections are coming across as double entries and not impacting the bottom line that's outstanding in your general ledger. And that is what ends up requiring these very large adjustments at the end of each year. Because a correction is everything from moving something, it got posted to the wrong account, to posting it to the right account, to abatements, to, you know, there's all sorts of, as I said, taxes are complicated. And so that, getting those to, finding all the things that weren't posted right has taken some time. I am pleased to say that it has not taken the hundreds and hundreds of hours that Ron Smith told me that it would take. I think I've done 70 hours, but the taxes, personal property and liens are, I know where all the things are. That said, that's through June 30th of 2025. And because that's the audit you're aiming for. The reason that I got involved in this is so that they can come and audit. They made it clear that they weren't going to do what they had done before, which is come in and do reconciliations and then audit, because that's really not an audit. If they're doing the work and then passing judgment on it, I'm not sure that's an audit. An audit is the work of what was done here. So that piece is, I'm almost through water, wastewater, which is much more challenging because it has been receipted differently. It's all in the Cassell program, which is a plus, but it doesn't close out daily. It closed out monthly for much of it. So that makes it more challenging when you're trying to find the things that aren't in the right place, or interests that got posted to something that should have been principal. Those little things that go like that. So that's the tax, so water. The other concern that I have, and I've shared it with, that is that the Nate and Ashley, whoever, there were at the end of 23, there were hundreds of audit adjustments. At the end of 24, there were less than that. But they were done at the end of 24, but they didn't get carried into 25. So the corrections that were made by the auditors to bring all the accounts to the right number are sitting there at the end of 24, but they're not in 25. So, and that's not just in taxes. That's not just it's in most of all of the audit adjustments that were made, which if you look at the end of June 24, your accounts are right. And if you look at the end of July, they're all wrong again, because the audit adjustments don't get pulled forward. And I am not a Cassell expert. I don't espouse to be, but there's some question about whether you can bring those forward until a year is closed. I'm not sure what it is, but you're way ahead of many places in that you have a 24 audit that's done in good numbers at the end of 24. Because if you've been reading the papers, you know that the majority of the world hasn't found one since 21 or 22, or maybe who knows when. But the unfortunate part is that good audit isn't in 25. It's hanging at the end of 24. Which was, when I started to balance taxes, I'm like, how can they be off this much? They were perfect at the end of '24, and I was looking at the end of '24, there are all the adjustments, and then I looked at the end of July, and they're not there. And they just aren't. So how to move that information forward is really important. And I'm thinking, you have genius IT people. You have genius IT people. And I'm
Great.
sure that and Cassell assistance, something's got to help those numbers come forward in such a way that it's not like Groundhog Day at the end of every year. You know, you've got it, your audit's done, your numbers are good, all that's great, and then you start the next year and the same things they look the same as they did the year before. So that is, I'm not sure how to fix that. As I said, I'm identifying an issue that relates to software and how it operates, and whether those year-end audit adjustments can be rolled into the current year after the end of the year. Many softwares automatically roll at the end of the year. It automatically does it, but Cassell doesn't. I think the budget piece, which is the strong part of Cassell as far as I'm concerned, your budget program in Cassell is strong. It allows you to have a lot of information. It allows you to, I don't like the fact that it adds revenues and expenses together in the presentation. I find that confusing, but it allows you to have a lot of reporting functions and that kind of thing. But the budgetary side of Cassell is not the finance side of Cassell. Finance is how much money do you have in the bank, how much is owed on your taxes, what's your undesignated fund balance, what are your outstanding loans, what are, the budget piece is over here. You raise money and it goes here, but your general ledger, which includes those fund accounting things, is the things those are the accounts that are wrong. And they're wrong because any adjustments made to them haven't been brought forward into this year. So now the adjustments that I have for all these tax years, and there are lots of them, liens and taxes and personal property and all those, have to bring 24 ahead and then bring the corrections for 25 ahead too. So that piece is, and I apologize for the level where I am here, because I'm sure it's confusing, but it's a piece of what's challenging the staff here in providing information or in having the ability to provide that information, is that the numbers are hung up at the end of a good audit, and then you're back to the wrong ones. And then, because now that they're all balanced, here when all of the rest of the audit things and making sure that all of those get carried as well forward, because just doing taxes and all that isn't going to help you. All those other audit adjustments that were made and not carried forward also need to be done as well. Then training staff here how to reconcile taxes, wastewater, blah, blah, blah. Then it wasn't possible until they were done, because I've done this for 45 years, and I will tell you there have been times when I've thrown things across the room in the last month because it's like, I can't find this, but it's, the good thing about numbers is there is always an answer, and you can find it, it just sometimes takes a bit. So that's where I'm at. I'm almost done with the water, wastewater, and that will kind of put a bow on that, but I also would strongly recommend that all of the other audit adjustments that were done at the end of, and as a final thing of the audit, some of the tax things that were done, adjustments that were done at the end of the 24 year didn't end up matching the list of outstanding accounts for that year either. So there's no objection. I need to talk to the auditor about if I make adjustments that affect things that were in 23, 24, like it's a big lump, it says that those numbers were right, and some of them weren't. And so if I tell the auditor the pieces that were wrong, they would have to restate those balances in your new audit coming forward. And I don't know what anyone's preference is, but I mean, the easy thing is just to do an adjustment that does it all. But if anyone were to check the list at the end of 24 for these, it wouldn't match.
There'd be like a small gap, and
There
it
would be
wouldn't
a
be
gap.
kind of noted at this.
So, so I haven't done anything in regard to what I was originally hired for in a while, because I have been working on trying to get all of the taxes and water, wastewater accounts. And like I said, you have taxes that go back to 2012 at least, and personal property that goes back almost that far, and liens that were, we have a lot of outstanding. I'd make some recommendations on those too, but just, you're never gonna collect those things that were back there where property ownership has changed and that kind of thing. But again, but I'm happy to answer questions, you know, what am I doing? That's what I'm doing. I'm really trying to get that in such a way that staff can do this work on a monthly basis, and that your numbers in your general ledger, which you need in order to know if you're gonna borrow money or if you're gonna do anything, are accurate I mean, they were at the end of 24. So if you take the end of 24 and add and subtract what you've done in 24, 25, and then in 25, 26, you'll get to the right number, but it should be, if it got carried forward, it would be right. So I'm happy to answer questions. I think I've probably been more confusing than, yes.
So you're making all these adjustments, these audit adjustments inside Cassell, correct?
I have not made any adjustment. I have a spreadsheet that's that big on all of the, not quite, but it's close, of where all these are. I don't
Work in the system. There.
I don't enter data in your system. All I do is find what's wrong, and the staff will be doing the
So
adjustment.
when you say that the audit adjustments that reconcile 2024 don't carry over to 2025, is that because they've been happening outside of the system and not in this? It's just, even if somebody
system-
goes in and updates the system, there's just no carryover.
They're in month 14, which is how staff uses, there's 12 months, right? They use a month, it took me a while to figure what that was, but they use a month 14 to enter all the audit adjustments. And that gives you the end of the year, which is everything that was through June plus this month 14. Those are all the things. And ta-da, those are good numbers. And then you look at July of 24, and they're wrong. They're the same thing they were before any audit adjustment in that month 14.
Do you mean July 25?
What's that?
Do you mean July 25?
No, I'm working on audit stuff
Okay.
for the 24-25 year. So it's July 1st
Okay,
of
so you're talking
24.
the year before, not
But
advancing forward.
June,
Okay.
the month 14, which includes the 23-24
Got it.
audit adjustments, at the beginning of, in the July one, it shows that correct balance, and then it shows all these things and they're gone again. So it's
It's not
back
taking
to
month
the
14 over.
month. If you went from June to July, it would look the same. Month 14 is the one that's right.
It doesn't sound like
Makes
it's
sense.
reading month 14. It's,
Month 14 is the one with the audit adjustments that stuck,
Yeah.
that they're there. But again, I'm not because I don't understand why it doesn't roll at year end, or why when you do an adjustment, there's not a way to bring those things just forward into the new year, which the majority of software is. This year in an old year, you've done something, you go into the new year, you create opening adjustments, it pulls the ones that you, from the last year and puts them in your new year, and that's it.
And just for some like historical perspective, maybe, so fiscal year '24, which is, I arrived at the very tail end of that, is really like, half of '23 and half of '24. So that's, and then when we finally got the fiscal year '24 reconciled, that audit back, we caught up on 2 or 3 previous years, as Sue mentioned. And those ones, like, they got us up to date, but when I saw the '24 audit, which by that time had almost been a year since I had arrived, I was like, that's exactly what I walked into. Like that, and the findings that we're going through from that are like, these are all the big pieces. And in that fiscal year '24, they switched from one programming software for finances to another. So, which to me is just like the idea of doing that in the middle of a fiscal year creates enormous complications. But the team's got it manually reconciled, gets it together, '24 is there. But then we're '25, now we're fully in Cassell for the full fiscal year. And that's the year that ended, even though calendar year '25 just concluded a couple weeks ago. Fiscal year '25 is 6 months in the past. But even with that, like we didn't, like a lot of the adjustments of all those pieces, like how do you carry over the half and half Cassell, Munis, all the zillions of things that happened into the '25, and we need to create a system that, and correct me if I'm wrong, Sue, that captures that each time. So
Well, the information is correct in Excel at the end of '24 for everything. And so if those numbers had just moved forward into July, but they didn't. Once you got the audit back and all those things were done, if you moved that into July, the '25 would have at least been as correct as at the end of '24 was.
right.
But what you have, because there's no, Nate, am I wrong? There's no automatic process to move that forward, or at least if there is, I haven't.
I was gonna
It
say,
hasn't been done.
Cassell has anybody talked with Cassell about? It seems like something that an expense is.
But I know we can do it, so.
Okay.
And that's kind of one of the things that, how do you build a bridge between that? I'm sure that's, Sue, what you're kind of doing and what you'll be talking to the auditors now. There were some adjustments from '23 and '24, and then the additional piece, like how that gets bridged into this year and gets updated throughout. It's kind of like, let's say you're negative 200,000 for the adjustments, not that it would be, but then you start the new fiscal year and you don't even include the fact that you were negative 200,000, like something,
Right.
that's essential. And then every single month, you're basically reconciling an inaccurate account every single month, because you didn't do the initial,
Because you started with the wrong number.
right.
And then they'll have to redo all of that work again
Well,
once we put
you
the right
shouldn't
number in.
have to redo all of, well, the
They have to
city of
re-reconcile.
Ellsworth has not historically reconciled any of these things. They have not reconciled taxes or personal property or liens or water, wastewater.
And that's normal work for a city to do, is to have
That-
somebody reconciling
That is
the account.
absolutely, every month,
Essential.
normal
It
stuff,
has
but
to.
it's,
It has to be done.
Essential, I would say normal in the
it's
state
a
of Maine.
normal,
It's a normal function of all
Right,
municipalities.
unfortunately, yeah.
Right.
but
And-
it's not, I don't know what I don't know. I know that with existing staff, when I first got here, and nobody had any idea what I was, that there was nobody on staff that had any experience with that activity during their tenure for the city. And your auditors had done it in prior years. And apart from the fact that that's an expensive process, because it is time-consuming, the fact of the matter is that it's, when these things are correct, reconciling any tax year in a 30-day period is this. You have 30 days to look in. You know, it's a short window. You know the beginning number was right. You know that, you know, it's not brain surgery or rocket science. But if you don't have the right number to start with, you can't.
Create a policies and procedures
can't
manual
do it.
for what to do.
So that's why I'm harping, good word, on the need to be able to move these numbers forward. Because when they move, it should adjust everything else.
Right.
In a perfect world, Trio would, and the other software that we have would communicate with Cassell. It's not doing that. There's one problem I see. And Cassell isn't enabling us to carry forward the previous fiscal year so that we have good numbers to start with.
Finance Director Moore just had indicated that hadn't happened, but he was going to talk to Cassell because he believed that there was a way for that to happen in terms of bringing the numbers forward. The Trio to Cassell connection is an Excel spreadsheet that moves numbers receipted up into Cassell, and they get spread around whatever accounts it says. But that Excel spreadsheet contains things that will have a negative and a positive that is the same number for the same account, which means there's no impact to that account. You haven't adjusted anything. And it's because in the Trio side of things, if there was a budgetary side to Trio, a general ledger side, when that moved, it would adjust itself, because that system is set up to do that. But you only have a piece of Trio. The only thing you have is receipting. All you're doing is, this is just a money in thing. And then it goes up to Cassell and goes into all the proper accounts. But because of the way Trio is set up, when it moves it into Cassell, Cassell doesn't know. Cassell doesn't, it knows numbers. Go to these accounts. Well, it did, but it doesn't know to say, heck, we got a debit and a credit, it's the same amount. You know, that means it's a X. We've got to do a Y. So with this system, what has to happen is every time that happens, there needs to be a journal that affects Cassell so that it's not just a wash when those things came through. And there are hundreds of those, hundreds of them that occur. So.
Yeah, and I think this is kind of from a, I'd say the last time, and it's been tough conversations, and thank you to the whole team and our tax office and our finance. I think once you are hearing people talk about the issue that you need to talk about, you're on the right path. But, and I've mentioned this publicly many times before, but I don't think the accounts in Ellsworth were truly reconciled since really Tammy Moe left, and that was like the 2020 time period. It was a very manual process, but there wasn't like a system that kept doing that. So then tax, wastewater, internally, they all start doing different systems, and there wasn't like a stability in the finance office so then they're getting years behind, in multiple years, and the processes are changing, and you do a software systems transfer over. So I think when Sue kind of came in, it was like, all right, we're close to reconciliation. Let's dial this in. Let's get the policies and procedures. Let's get this. And Sue's kind of does an audit of the system, goes in the weeds. It's like, you're still not properly reconciling or on a path to that. We still have to do like 100 different process changes under the current systems with the other ones, so that at least we could get to a policies and procedures manual. But even that, is what I'm seeing now, is that's not going to be ideal. We're going to be able to do it, but still very manual. We have all these different systems. There's going to need to be at some point in time kind of an audit of our systems so that we can not have to have a 175-page policy and procedure manual for how to reconcile through 16 different systems, and to have it much more seamless. This isn't hard. Once you're fully reconciled and you have a staffing structure in place and a system in place, this shouldn't be very difficult, but
Well,
we need to get there.
It won't be, and even now, if Cassell can catch up the prior years, I'm not, my taxes, all these, the fact that I know where the numbers are, your other accounts are wrong. Undesignated, anything that had an adjustment didn't move forward. So, that piece that Nate's gonna figure out how to do that is really critical. I think one of the most critical. He didn't realize that I for some naive reason, thought it might be just taxes, and no. They all got treated the same, because I think if you move one thing, you move something, you've got to move it all. And then the budgetary posting piece, your budget posting, when I started this, which is really good, but your revenues and expenses in a budget equal. That's how a commitment works. And when you look at your reports, they don't. And they don't because there were pieces missing. The budget got rolled into budgetary before you committed taxes. And so you didn't have the good number for business equipment tax reimbursement or homestead exemption or TIF. All those things were not. So in future years, when you shouldn't post your budget until what you've been doing traditionally is just rolling it when you finish your budget process. But that's not everything, because everything's not in there. And that was another audit finding, is that the budget's not. And that is a really simple, it's just get your assessment done early. July is best. And when that commitment is done, post the whole thing correctly, and then your budget's balanced. And when you see reports, you'll see that estimated revenues equals budgeted expenses, and that's what the audit thing is looking for in that piece. And it's still possible to do audit adjustments in this fiscal year. I assume most softwares can to do budget adjustments that will allow you to make those entries correctly so that your budgetary reports, the totals
Right.
match as well.
Yeah, I think that's kind of one of the things for the learning curve here and how interconnected these pieces are on the commitment, the assessment, Betty, the overlay. And I'd noticed that probably a year and a half ago when I was looking at things, and I'd get like one report from the assessor on commitment, and then I'd look at prior year budget numbers on what the taxes and expenditures were, and I was like, these things are all off by a similar number each year, not exact, but I was like, these are all off by like a bit. And now I know why. It's because of that exact process. For 5 or 6 years, they weren't including those pieces. And this year we're going to have another adjustment of 250-odd thousand that we have to pay back. So this to the revenue department for a mistake on our business exemption.
But that isn't, because of the way your commitment works, that was absorbed in property tax. The actual number of Betty, you might have budgeted for Betty to be 500,000, and you're only really gonna get 3, or something happened. When you do your commitment, it absorbs it, because it only looks at your budgeted expenses as the driver. Your budget expenses minus your revenues, not including Betty homestead revenue sharing. Those. So if there was an oops, it's in property tax. You're not short.
No, we're gonna.
Oh, you got money back that you shouldn't have gotten.
Right,
That's a
the
different-
budget will just be wrong for this year. It will be, for FY '26, it's gonna say we were anticipating X amount, and we're gonna be minus 250,000. And we got, in that other previous year, I couldn't speak for the budgeting on those 2 years ago and what it was, but we budgeted there was probably a spike in Betty that year, based on that one printer that was multiplied by 2018. instead of the year 2023 instead of, so that created a $110,000 over reimbursement for 2 consecutive years. So those years probably had a little spike. But as we're getting better in these things too, we'll be able to, like, why in the world is Betty up, in the assessing consulting firm who we've been talking to, like they have a ton of analytics that they can apply to these pieces so that we can notice those things quicker
But
too.
I do want to note that staff here has all been amazing to work with, and very helpful, and extremely anxious to get to right. I think that the path to right is only complicated by the number of systems that you're trying to coordinate, and the non-centered structure of how your finances have been set up in the past, which is someone over here is doing this, and someone over here is doing this, and somebody over, but finance should really be the hub for everything that does that. And I've seen nothing to say that I believe they're anxious for that to happen, because everything that's done somewhere else that isn't reconciled or whatever comes back to them to feed into the system wrong. So, this isn't, oh my God, you've got great numbers through 24, find a way to carry those into 25. Do the adjustments that are necessary in the accounts that I've seen thus far, and as I said, I haven't looked beyond much. Taxes, liens, sewer, water, that's quite a big, that's your biggest money source, so that's been the priority, but then you should be in pretty good shape. I mean, it's kind of clunky to be looking for these corrections when it's one more step for Ashley or whoever in finance is looking at those uploads, that when you're seeing a debit and a credit that are the same number going in the tax years, to understand that an adjustment it will require going back into Trio and find out if it was an abatement, if it was a correction, if it was a supplement, whatever it was, it needs a journal to fix it once it gets to Casella.
I have 2 questions, I think one to you and then one to you, Sue. Thank you for this information, and appreciate hearing that staff has been in with you in this and sorting through it. That's important for us to hear, so I appreciate that. With this disconnect, are we looking at, does Cassell have whatever it is Trio is providing that we can look at? Does it make sense to reduce the number of systems we're working with?
I think over the long period, yes, potentially. And we're, IT and I are working on a proposal for this budget cycle. I've pretty much said everything freeze, hold, except for IT, who I think we can take advantage of these 2 geniuses a little more if they're not
That was
on the
nice to hear.
tickets as much, because they do have budgeting, finance. I mean, they're doing things from streetlight repairs, this and that are really helping the city incredibly. And if they had the bandwidth, I'd say, yeah, I'd like a more holistic, and they want to too, but that's probably the biggest tech project. We just did that. That was part of the
Yeah,
Cassell.
yeah.
It's kind of like, we already paid for it. We're there. We have to take this. I can't turn back time and not do a but so I feel like the near term is like under our current systems,
Yeah.
lock it in, policies and procedures, how we carry it forward. Cassell is great on the budgeting side, great on some other things, but like any contractor or other firm, is there either through Cassell or some other process changes where we can get to a steady state for finance where it's easy? And if the answer is no, and we need a different piece, that could be something, we're going to add another hat, and like we think of a hat and a hat and a hat, because we don't do procurement, grants management, and contracting kind of software solutions. So if, as I've mentioned before, that's one of the reasons we're going to this digital side of things. We're going with OpenGov that does procurement contracting, and it's going to be great. Then how do we crosswalk that into our Cassell system and see how that goes as well? We'll
Right.
finally be able to, I know Sue will probably don't have enough time today to get your recommendations on some of our procurement policies that are a little bit outdated. as we talked about, and but once we get that software system on too, I'm going to be able to build the rules into that system and then come back to council and say, these are our new ironclad rules for procurement. It has to go through this system, and if all these boxes aren't checked, like, thing does not get procured. And then it gets procured, it goes into contracting, and it goes, so OpenGov offers a holistic solution, that could be part of it, or maybe we stick with a little bit more, we're in a good steady state, the policies and procedures are known, we have staff that's sticking around for more than a year, to keep that baked in. But, also looking towards the future on staff starts departing in mass in the finance department, but we can still send a pretty easy solution that it's not gonna take a year for that finance individual to do that.
I mean, this all sounds good, and I agree. The decision was made, we're working with what we've got. Does Cassell have what Trio does? Or does OpenGov have what Trio does, as you're looking at options?
OpenGov does. I don't think Trio has it. I think Munis is the solution. I don't know if Trio does, though. Does Trio have an overarching solution
No,
for
I'm talking
budgeting?
about you said Trio manages revenue coming in.
Trio's on,
Yes, Trio
So-
does our, we take in pretty much all the money that's counted,
Yeah.
goes in through Trio. That's also where we do our registration,
Right.
all of that.
And that wasn't brought into Cassell at the time because Cassell didn't do that side of the work?
I don't know,
I don't believe Cassell can do
right, I think that.
registrations
Okay.
and that, they're not.
Okay. So that explains why.
and this
we
is
are where we
natural
are,
for,
but-
for most municipalities. I think, Sue, correct me if I'm wrong, we are abnormal in that we have even more hats on hats on hats. OpenGov, I'd say, in the systems that I looked into, was the most, had the largest level of solutions, but, it seemed like everybody that had their kind of expertise in 3 or 4 different categories, or maybe 5 or 6 different categories, so for your code enforcement and other pieces. And so there might, I think, kind of an audit with our teams too, on once we get to a steady state and we're actually fully reconciled, all right, how can these pieces work better together? What kind of systems and solutions? And then we're a little more forward-thinking as opposed to let's get this
Right,
warrant out there.
right. No, that sounds good.
And sorry, we do have a hand on, so maybe
Well,
Nate has something to
okay.
add there too.
Now, I just wanted to clarify, Cassell does have a property tax collection module. We don't have that because we're using Trio, and I know Trio's very well known, and it's probably better than Cassell's portion, but Cassell does have a property tax collection module.
They have motor vehicle?
No. It does, I don't think the state of Maine recognizes Cassell as a software for,
Yeah.
because it's not, there's only 2 communities in the state that have Cassell, which
Right.
is you and York, right? You and somebody.
Right now, yeah.
So
Yeah,
the-
and the state partners with these software,
Oh, I
with
see.
Trio and Munis and some of these, so that they can, the motor vehicle registration information and all that kind of stuff, and dogs, and
Right, it's all downloaded from the
it's all
state
downloaded
into
from
our
the state
system.
too.
Okay.
That, but
And they
Cassell,
like Trio.
yeah, Cassell isn't a vendor for that.
Got it.
Um,
So the other question to you, Sue, in this, looking at the impact on taxpayers, there's the systems impact, and we're very aware of the work to be done and why it matters. I heard you say that one of the outcomes is we lost opportunities to build property tax and personal property tax a decade ago or more. But we're not hearing from anyone that one of the errors, or one of the impacts of not bringing things forward is people aren't getting billed for property taxes they've already paid. So this is
No,
within
the-
the system, but the system is registering that people have paid and we're not.
The
Dealing with
Trio
that issue.
system is doing your tax billing. It's doing your receipting.
Okay,
So the list of, and that's the Bible. That
Got it.
list of outstanding taxes, because all the payments have been made in Trio to affect all these accounts. The list of what's outstanding is the Bible. That's the correct thing. That's where all the money has been has
Got it.
gone and gone into accounts. Now, are there occasionally times when it goes into a wrong account and then comes back out and goes into the right account? Of course, this is human
yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
beings, but those are right, that we're the wheels come off that bus is when it moves into Cassell, and a correction has been made, or an abatement has been done over here, and it crosses into Cassell as a debit and a credit, instead of
Right.
just as a debit, or just as a credit. It doesn't, because generally what there would be another offset account where the other piece of it would go, whatever it was. It would go here and there, but because Trio doesn't have that set up in it, it just goes to the same place. It doesn't,
Right.
It's
Does it know
transferring
any-
numbers that are not right. You're getting this amount and this amount, and when it comes out in Casella, it's equal.
it's equal.
Right. And it-
One's a debit and one's a credit, so it doesn't affect
Yeah, it's
the
net
outstanding
neutral,
amount.
yeah.
Right.
And that's, as I said, that is,
That's-
when I was here before, I said, I'm really confused why these posts and these tax accounts, I've got a debit and a credit, it's the same thing. Like, what is what? And when I went, there were a lot of them, but they're corrections or abatements made in Trio that, when they come across, don't come across that way. They come across both ways.
So we gotta fix, we've got to have Casella fixed.
Well,
to-
Cassell can't fix that. Cassell, because there's not, Trio and Cassell don't really talk to each other. There's a program, an Excel program that I think, who made the Excel program?
Nate, for IT&E. Yeah,
IT&E.
IT&E.
That moves it. It's taking receipts and putting them into a system, that's what it's doing. And since the abatements and corrections are not money, they're things that happened without the exchange of cash, right? They're moving them in a receipting system, since they didn't affect, the only way they can't affect cash that way is to put them in as a negative and a positive. Otherwise, your money would be off.
So Nate's got a spreadsheet up behind you.
So I have an example, I have an example on the screen, this is just showing.
Nate,
so
can
this
you,
is a trade
Nate, can you
deposit
zoom
from
in
last
like
week.
3 times? We see that you have a spreadsheet, but we can't see any of the numbers.
If you could zoom in on the
Zoom in like
lower right corner.
300%.
Yeah, there we go.
Even if we can see one line to understand as you describe it.
Okay, but this,
There we
There
go.
we go.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's the import, but it doesn't break it down.
well, this is, yeah, but if you go into a year of tax, I can't think of one right off the top of my head, and pick a month that might have had a correction, what you see in the, not in this, but in the account, the tax account in Cassell, you'll see a beginning balance, you'll see a debit and then a credit for the
Right.
same date. And what that is a correction that came across from, but as I said, but this is, it just, these are the account numbers, and it just plugs this into those accounts. But if there were, what you would see, if it was one that I'm talking about, you'd see a debit and a credit. You wouldn't
Right,
just
and those
see
are only
all
credits,
these
but,
debits. You'd
yeah.
see a debit and a credit on one of them.
Okay.
And then that turns into the report that you give us every month, Nate, in Cassell.
What's that?
I said, and then essentially gets turned into the Cassell report that we see every month on the taxes receivables, on where we're at by the year, but it's
Okay.
based on this crosswalk via an Excel sheet into the
But
system.
the Cassell number that you see every month is wrong. Your outstanding amounts, if you wanted a correct amount of outstanding tax at the end of each, you would get the list from your tax collector out of Trio. That would give you the total outstanding for each
And
month.
what you see from us is just what's been received.
What's been received as potentially budgeted for the year, or what we would expect at that point in the year.
what you've received, the what you've still got to go is depending on when you're spending your money,
Right.
you know, is a number to watch to how are your taxes coming in, you know, after the first payment is due, have you collected 50% or more of your taxes? Where are you at, when you place liens, what percentage of liens? Those are just because by the end of June, you've spent, technically, all the money you raised from the prior commitment. But you haven't collected it all. Everybody hasn't paid their taxes. Some go to liens, so
Right.
that buffer impacts how much money you have available moving forward. All these years of outstanding taxes, you've already spent all that money in the budget years that you budgeted them. But you will eventually collect the majority of it, but the shortage impacts how much of your undesignated fund balance is really
Right.
available.
So we are at 9:00. We have other big things on the agenda. We don't have a meeting next week because of the holiday.
I apologize, I'm taking.
No, this
No,
is-
we actually, I wanted you up front so that we really could have this conversation in as much time as it took. So I appreciate that you've been here and have been able to help walk us through understanding this. And the one piece I guess I want to make sure I take away further down in the agenda, what we had planned on was looking at police overtime. Now, that doesn't relate to the issues here, because the issues here are just revenue, not internal. So the information we have for that is accurate and solid, and,
Budgetary
Yeah.
is, your revenues and expenses in your budget is 1 year. It's the year you're
Yeah.
currently in.
Right.
The money you budgeted, it's got nothing to do with how much you've got in the bank. It's
Right.
just got to do
Just
with
wanted-
whatever your budget. That's
wanted
it.
to make sure that, well, what we budgeted and what's been spent so far in that account is not impacted by this issue that we're
No,
dealing with. I
not
wanted
at
to
all.
be clear on that one. How do you want to handle this with,
I actually think we're in pretty good shape. We can probably hold off on, and Ashley, on the credit report, and the police overtime discussion for managers is for January 26th. That's just a note that it's that.
thank you,
Yep,
okay.
and then we have-
I was afraid we were going to go to that.
No, so the last is just the warrant, is, you know, if there's anything from the warrant.
Thank you. That was
So-
really helpful, and thank you for supporting the city.
Well,
in
I
this work.
appreciate, as I said, the opportunity. Ellsworth staff's been great to work with, and although I'm sure every time I leave, I know Ashley said, "Oh my God, I feel like we're back to the," and
Yeah.
you're not. That you're closer to the end than I think you've probably been in.
Can I make an analogy with my hiking in Acadia? Like, you go up and then you got to go down, knowing that you're going to have to go up again, and then you get down. But eventually, you get to the peak of the mountain.
Looking
But
out.
you've got to, it's like yesterday I said, why do I have to go back down? We know I'm going to have to go back up again. The dog did not have an answer, but it is that same of like, okay, now we're going to go back up. But it is progress. It is going up. So
And it gives me courage, you know, encourages me to be able to look at my constituents and say, we're making progress from years
Oh,
of.
I think that you, like I said, if you have a good audit through '24, which means you've got 1 year that's not
Right.
audited, but 1 year not audited, under the control of staff that were all here for the whole
Yeah.
year, the manager that was here. I mean, the revolving door that you had for some time, it would be hard to ask a question to someone because they might have been there 12 minutes. And so
yeah,
this 24-25 year has much less capacity for error than the prior year audit did. And the things that I'm reconciling are not errors that staff have made. They're created by the fact that the system doesn't know what to do with these corrections, abatements, and other things. I mean, yes, are there some things that the They
Sorry.
don't.
That's encouraging.
Well, that's not, the problem isn't that someone's negligent.
No, it's just
It-
the
it's
way the
that it-
programs work.
The way they're
Mm.
talking to each other when it comes to those things. And if Nate has a way to get month 14 to roll into July, then it will,
Right,
the world will look a lot better in terms of your numbers. Because, as I said, 24, 25, you had the same staff, you had good information, you had a good budget, you had all of those things. So the 24, 25 is gonna look nothing like 23, 24.
right.
Yeah, it gives us this ability, I think, my year kind of wrap up and look ahead to council will be out soon, but this is one of those pieces that I have vision, understanding, clarity, and agility in this department, that VUCA. And, I know where this group's going. I'm so excited because, I think that until you said it, just like, for a year and a half, every single member of the finance department and like in the tax collection area, and our water and wastewater, like they can start talking about it. The system is kind of forcing them to do bad process because it was a 5 years of breaking involved, but we can get there and then really start to get to that level of, all right, now that we've fixed the system as currently operated, is this the
To
most
make it a better
optimal piece?
system, right.
How do we get it even
Yeah.
better? And, there's a few, and the assessing piece, how do we optimize that? That's a big critical component. We're gonna be doing that over the next 6 months. And then we can start to coast a little bit, so I'm excited.
Yeah, as I said, the closer to July you can commit taxes, the better your cash flow is, the better
That's
your
on the list as well, yeah.
numbers are, all of those things. I mean, those are,
Yeah.
Important.
they're really set you up to be better with where your cash flow is. You can count on the fact that your due dates are these 2 days a year, the end. We
Yep.
always commit in here, we always, it just standardizes the process. And
Great, thank you.
Awesome. Thank you all.
thank you.
Thanks, Sue.
All right,
Yeah, we
Thanks.
appreciate it.
so is the rest just a minute or two?
Yep, I think
No,
we
this has
can,
been.
we can table
Great.
so as long as you're right with it, Ashley, we can table solar credit for a bit and,
Yeah, last week, like, they weren't working, so there's like, it's not like we're on the cusp of anything major.
We did get an email, they're back online, so
Great.
within like the next few months, and obviously it's winter time, so
Yeah.
we're not gonna see a crazy amount of credits come in, but I'll be tracking it each
Great.
month.
I guess having that process in place is a win, so.
yeah.
And then thank you for the clarification, Richard. Just the note that,
Yeah, I tried to keep the
Discussion.
agenda short just with Sue being there,
Yeah.
but really it's just that there's no finance meeting next week, and then we'll have the financials to discuss as well as the police overtime piece on the 26th.
and that's with this group, not the council.
Yeah, and I could see also adding maybe, as we saw today, the workshops maybe going down below so we can see Nate's finance spreadsheets a little better. It might be something for
Yeah,
considering of a
if
format.
this, how do you all feel about if we were down there like we are with the workshops, we can connect with Nate more easily with his spreadsheets?
I'm good. I'm kind of like an owl anyways. I'll keep turning, if I'm, get my back to him, I'll turn my head.
Well, yeah,
'Cause I don't want Ray to think he's being isolated.
there's fewer of us than the workshop, so yeah, having the back
Yeah.
to the audience is a,
Yeah, and I guess the finance committee, I think Ray was there when the finance committee meeting was just in the city manager's
Yeah.
office, and they just kind of had the warrant out there, so a little bit more.
so is there any public comment as we get to?
Yeah.
If you do, then up to the podium, please.
My name's Mary Dixon, and I kind of asked the city manager for information on the solar. It's just an interest that I have, and I'm trying to learn, and I'm trying to look at the reports and that. But where that's not being discussed today, can I bring up another issue I kind of missed a meeting on?
Sure.
I've heard the discussion on doing the new track and a soccer field and the handicap accessibility. I go to soccer games there, don't do any track attendance. And I know on the backside, you have to park a ways away and you have to climb the stairs. And once you get to the stairs, there is a ramp to take you, a wheelchair accessible person to take you up to the bleachers. And some of the discussion I heard was they were talking about a ramp up to that level. A lot of times I will park on Forest Ave. In the middle of the track, on Forest Ave, there is a paved access, maybe card width, but in an operating gate, where the little gator comes in to deliver water or whatever around the outside of the track. And then down by the building, there is a space to get in for people walking and stuff, want to get out and walk, to come in onto the track. And I was wondering if consideration has been given to making that be the handicap accessible area onto the track. And you put a couple parking spaces there. Because once they get in on the track, you can go around the outside of the track, come in on the other gate opening, and use the ramp to get into the bleachers.
You know, so as luck would have it, I'm meeting with the school superintendent this afternoon on this piece. You know, the city side of it is more in the financing and and we're partnering on the fundraising piece with our Parks and Rec director. They're about to issue the RFP, but I'd love to maybe just, if you have a second, kind of just pull up a map in my office and you can kind of show me what you're talking about, and then I can kind of point that out and maybe connect you with the Parks and Rec director.
It just seems I don't think there's that many people. I can't imagine coming up ramps in like a wheelchair, or I have health issues, and a lot of times I will park on the street on Forest Ave, come in through and walk around and sit in the bleachers, because those stairs are hard for my health issues. I cannot imagine anybody with a cane or health issue wanting to navigate the ramp system up when it's already there.
Yeah,
on
let
the
me,
other side.
I'd love to just grab you for 2
Yeah,
seconds afterwards, and then you can kind of
most
point it out, and then I
definitely. Love the
can
opportunity.
see as we're doing the RFP. It's a good time to think about redesigning, so. Thanks, and sorry we're
Timing.
tabling the solar credit, I know you've been
No, that's okay, because I'm still learning. I have a 15-year-old grandson who decided to use my laptop for gaming.
Okay.
And, yeah, I can't print. It's a mess. So,
Awesome. Well, thank you, Mary. We'll touch
Is
base
there
then.
any other public comment? We are done. Thank you very much.
Thank you all.